Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am talking about more anticipated releases. So I have already done 2 anticipated releases videos that I really think that you should go and check out. I did an adult anticipated releases, which included queer adult releases as well as other adult releases that I was excited about. I have also done a queer YA anticipated releases video, and today I am talking about more YA. So this video is going to be covering a lot more YA books that are coming out between January and June of 2019. There isn't necessarily a theme to this one, although I will say that because my tastes tend to lean towards reading more diverse books, most of these have some form of racial diversity, disability representation. This is also still in no way covering every single anticipated book that has been on my list. Please go check out some of the resources in the description below. I will put a couple of lists of Own Voices books that are coming out in 2019, some debuts. I will put my own anticipated releases Goodreads shelf, which is at about 170 books. But with that out of the way, let's talk about these books in release date order. So the first book that I want to talk about is Slayer by Kiersten White, which was already released on January 8th. This book is set in the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and follows a girl named Nina who has grown up in the Watchers Academy. At this academy, teens are trained as guides for slayers who are supernaturally strong women who fight against the powers of darkness. There's some stuff that I don't want to reveal about this book because it will spoil the end of the Buffy series, but the point is that something occurs and it turns out Nina is going to be the last Slayer ever. I am super excited to read this book, to read more in the Buffy universe, especially because it's by Kiersten White and this has been getting some great early reviews, so of course I'm excited to read it. Next up, I want to talk about A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer, and this book is being released on January 29th. Some people really love this author. I have never read anything by Brigid, ever. But this sounds like an interesting take on Beauty and the Beast, and we know that I'm there for any and all retellings. So this book follows Prince Ren, who has been cursed to repeat the autumn of his 18th year over and over again, but at the end of that fall, he becomes a monster, and there are horrifying consequences, and this is going to be his 300th autumn that he's lived through, and it's going to be his last one. It's also about a girl named Harper who is trying to hold her family together. Her mother has cancer and it's creating this real financial drain, this real struggle within the family, and Harper also has cerebral palsy. And then one day when Harper is helping someone in her hometown, Washington, D.C., she stumbles into another world. I'm super interested to read this Beauty and the Beast retelling. I've heard a lot of people say that this is offering something really new to the story, which it's been done a lot of times, so I'm excited about that prospect. Plus I also know this book has some queer side rep, so very excited. Next up, I want to talk about a book that has got to be on everybody's anticipated releases list, and that is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, which is being released on February 5th. I have already pre-ordered a copy, so I'm all set. This book is about a 16-year-old Bree who has dreams of becoming a rap legend. Her dad was an underground rap legend, so she has some big shoes to fill. So it's about all of this, but it's also about the fact that Bree's mother has recently lost her job and bills are starting to pile up, and it's looking less and less likely like their family is going to be able to remain afloat. Angie Thomas wrote The Hate You Give, which was such a celebrated book. It is still at #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list so many weeks later, and I cannot wait to read this follow-up. Next up, The Weight of Our Sky by Hanna, Alkaf, which is also being released on February 5th. So this is set in 1969 in Malaysia, and it is about a music-loving teen with OCD doing everything that she can to find her way back to her mother during the Malaysian race riots. I've heard really incredible things about the OCD rep in this book. In the context of the summary, it says that the main character, Natalie, believes that she has a demon inside of her, and that's what's causing her to sort of obsess, so I'm interested in that perspective. But I feel like I've talked fairly frequently about the fact that most of the people in my life deal with some form of OCD, so I'm excited for that reason. Plus, this just sounds heart-pounding, heartbreaking, and I am just really excited to read a book set in Malaysia. Moving on, let's talk about The Black Coats by Colleen Oakes, which is being released on February 12th. So in this book, there is this society called the Black Coats, and they are a group that exacts violence on men who who have hurt women and girls. They're incredibly secretive, but the main character, Thea, gets invited to join this group, which she is so excited to do because she feels she will finally be able to exact vengeance on the man who murdered her cousin and walked away free. This is all a really interesting concept on its own, but also at the very end of the summary it suggests that Thea starts to question the level of violence that the Black Coats are exacting. She starts to question their motives. I think this sounds a lot like The Female of the Species that came out a couple of years ago, which I never read, but always sort of interested me. But I think this goes along a lot of the same lines of seeking revenge on behalf of women who have been wronged. So, very, very curious to see what this one does with that concept. Next up, I want to talk about The Great Unknowable End by Kathryn Ormsbee, which is being released on February 19th. So Kathryn Ormsbee wrote Tash Hart's Tolstoy, which I read 2 years back and really, really enjoyed. So it's already pretty much set on reading whatever Kathryn wrote next, but there's a lot happening in this summary. So this book is set in the 70s in Kansas. It's about two characters. The first is a girl named Stella who has always wanted to be a space engineer, but after her mother commits suicide and her brother runs off to join a local hippie cult, she's left to take care of her sister and kind of hold the bare remains of their family together. And then there's Galliard, who is actually grown up inside of this cult, and he's always felt really accepted. He doesn't know a world outside of the Red Sun where everyone accepts him for his Tourette's and everything about who he is. But when he loses a chance to become the resident artist of the Red Sun, then he starts to question more what happens outside of the walls of this cult. So this is a lot on its own, but then this book also has fabulism elements because stuff starts going down that makes it seem like the world is going to end. Like real freaky shit. Like I said, this book has a lot going on, but I loved Tash Hart's Tolstoy, so I think I'm going to like this one as well, even though it's very, very different tonally. Next, I want to talk about Tarot by Marissa Kennerson, which is being released on February 19th as well. This is a fantasy world inspired by tarot decks with characters inspired by different cards. It's specifically about a girl named Anna who is the forbidden offspring of a queen and the king's mortal enemy. So Anna has grown up in this tower with only her mentor and her friend to keep her company, but on the eve of her 16th birthday, when Anna thinks it is going to be time for her to be released from the tower, she discovers the thing that she didn't know, which is that she is the offspring of the queen and an incredibly powerful magician, and the king fears her because he believes that the magician's powers are going to rise up in her. I am overall really fascinated by this concept and the way that tarot is being used throughout the creation of this world. So mostly I'm invested in reading it just to discover more how this world is built, and I'm interested in Anna and that storyline, but I'm mostly fascinated by this concept. Jumping a lot of weeks forward, I want to talk about Dig by A.S. King, which is being released on March 26th. A.S. King is pretty well known for writing wild, weird books, and I've only read one of her books, and that's Ask the Passengers, which I really enjoyed, but I would like to read more of her work. This book, from what I've been able to piece together from the summary and different reviews, is about this family of potato farmers who at one point had no money and then eventually became incredibly rich. And it is about the grandchildren of the people who made this family rich, and they are starting to discover the seedy underside of how this family got their money. It's difficult to piece together exactly what this book is about because everyone kind of says, this book is weird, just go into it not knowing anything, and I also can't explain the plot to you, which is basically how everyone describes every A.S. King book. But I'm sure that this is going to have A.S. King's standard fabulous twist while also being gorgeous, while also digging into some really fascinating topics. The fact that I've only read Ask the Passengers, which I think is on the lower end of A.S. King's weirdness scale, is probably not prepared me for the realities of Dig, but I'm really excited to read something new. Next, I want to talk about Descendant of the Crane by Joan, and this is being released on April 2nd. This is a Chinese-inspired imperialist fantasy world. It's about Princess Hasina, and she has always kind of shirked off the responsibilities of being a ruler, but when her entire family is killed and she becomes queen, then she is very much thrust into the spotlight. But it becomes more and more clear that Hesina's father must have been murdered by someone close to him, and she can't get to the bottom of this mystery, so she does the unthinkable and the unforgivable, and she teams up with a soothsayer to try to get to the bottom of the mystery and get a handle on this new kingdom that she's inherited. I first became aware of this book when the cover was announced, because it's one of the most gorgeous, wonderful, cool-looking covers ever, and as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, oh my god, tell me 100% more about whatever this is, because obviously I'm going to read it. It sounds like it's going to have some really brutal fantasy elements, and actually a few of the books that I've talked about and am going to talk about in this video are brutal fantasies, but apparently that's a theme for 2019 and a theme of what I want to read in 2019. Speaking of brutal fantasies, let's talk about Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, which is also being released on April 2nd. So this book is set in a Russian-inspired world, and it apparently is the darkest, goriest, bloody thing ever based on reviews. Like, so many reviews for this book come with trigger warnings for how gory it is, so possibly prepare yourself going in if you have a difficult time with those topics, or if you can't read it, understandable. The actual summary of this book is somewhat vague, so the more information I know is information that I've gathered from early reviews. This is about a girl who is a peasant cleric, and instead of just hearing the voice of one god who bestows one power upon her, as is standard in this world, she hears the voices of many gods who give her whatever power she needs. It's also about a prince in danger and a boy with a monstrous secret. And it's all set during a centuries-long war. Like, we're set down in the middle of a war. We're not starting it. We're right in the middle of it. This has gotten a lot of comparisons, I'm sure, obviously, to the Grisha world, in that it is Russian-inspired fantasy, but I think some people are also comparing it to the Grishaverse because it's this darker, grittier fantasy world. Regardless, I'm super interested in this concept, plus I know there are multiple queer side characters, or there will be. I know book one, at the very least, has a character that Emily has referred to on Twitter as a tiny murder lesbian. Be still, my beating heart. I love her already. Let's move on to some contemporary and talk about Girls on the Verge by Sharon Biggs Waller, which is being released on April 9th. This is a book that's dealing with teen pregnancy and abortion very head-on. This is not the only book that is dealing with this topic, by the way. There's also Belly Up by Ava Darrows, which I didn't get to talk about in my queer releases video, but it is a very queer book about a bisexual, biracial girl dealing with teen pregnancy. But this is yet another book dealing with teen pregnancy, and this one is taking the route of exploring abortion and the availability of abortion. So it's about a girl named Camille, and the evening that she learns that she's going to get into like this prestigious theater program, she also discovers that she's pregnant. She knows she can't tell her parents, and she knows she can't keep the baby, and so she reaches out to a girl she barely knows from theater and asks her to drive her to an abortion clinic. And the two of them are going to set off, and then Camille's best friend, who does not agree with Camille's decision at all, just last minute decides to join them. So it's about these three girls, their differing opinions, and all of them going on this road trip together to get Camille where she needs to go and to get her the help that she needs. I'm thrilled that YA is being given the chance to take on this subject a little bit more. I think it's unexplored, and I think it's an especially important topic to investigate in YA and for teens to know about, so I'm very excited to read this one. Moving on, I want to talk about a graphic novel, Hotel Dare by Terry Blass, with art by Claudia Aguirre, and this is being released on April 16th. This book is about Olive and her two adopted siblings going to visit their abuela at her old creepy hotel, and while they are wandering the hotel, they discover that doors lead to a variety of different worlds. So any door they open, they can just stumble into a different magical world. I love this concept. I think it reminds me vaguely of some other like middle grade books that I read when I was younger, namely Fablehaven, but I'm interested in this new take on it. I'm really interested in the fact that this is a graphic novel, and I love Terry Blass, who I have followed online for a number of years, and I really love all of the things he creates. So all of that has led to me being very, very eager to read this graphic novel. Next, I want to talk about Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali, and this is being released on May 7th. The basic idea of this book, like breaking it down to its most bare bones, is that it is a Muslim love story about a girl named Zainab who is the only Muslim in her class, and it's a really, really negative environment. Her teacher keeps reminding everyone in the class how bad Muslims are, and so she gets suspended for calling out this teacher, and she winds up going to visit her aunt in Qatar. And while she's there, she meets Adam, who has sort of checked out of life after being diagnosed with MS. But ultimately, Muslim love story. I am so excited. I think it's going to be delightful and wonderful while also dealing with clearly some tougher topics, which I feel like we've established through these anticipated releases videos that is my jam. That is exactly what I'm here for. An overall light romance that deals with some really intense stuff. A lot of people loved S.K. Ali's book that came out a little bit ago, and I never read that one, but I want to read this one and then maybe go and revisit that one as well. Also on May 7th, I want to talk about Nocturna by Maya Motain. This is a Latin American fantasy inspired by the author's Dominican heritage, according to the little blurb that was originally released. So this fantasy is about Finn, a face changer, and she is a criminal, and then she is caught by a mobster and threatened that if she doesn't pull off a very specific job, she will lose her magic forever, which is devastating because face changing is something that she uses on a constant basis. She hasn't seen her own face in years. And then there's Prince Alfer, who his older brother recently died, and so Alfer is now the person in line for the throne, and he doesn't want that responsibility, so he starts maybe dabbling in forbidden magic in order to bring his brother back to life. And the two of them cross paths. I gotta tell you, I am so excited to see the cover of this because it sounds like a really excellent fantasy and it has the potential for such a cool and interesting cover. It's gonna be amazing. I can't wait to see the cover and I can't wait to read this book. Next up, With Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is also being released on May 7th. I feel like everyone is really, really excited about this book, especially after how much everybody loved The Poet X last year, so I think this is gonna be a very bold follow-up. This book is about a girl named Amoni Santiago, and she has a young daughter to take care of. She's also trying to finish up her senior year of high school, and she loves cooking. But despite this love, she knows that she doesn't have time for her high school's culinary arts class, and she doesn't have the money to go on the school's trip to Spain, but she still has this passion that she wants to pursue, and so she really throws herself into cooking. This book features an Afro-Latinx main character, and from what I've read from reviews, I believe the entirety of the cast are people of color. I also know that there is some queer side rep, and that this book has a magical realism element to it. It has a gorgeous cover. Everyone loved Elizabeth Acevedo's writing in The Poet X, so I am super excited about this one. Also because it is dealing with a young mother, like, who's still going to school. Again, I'm so excited to see these topics explored more in YA. Second to last, I want to talk about The Voice in My Head by Dana L. Davis, and this is being released on May 28th. This book is dealing with some incredibly tough subjects, just so you know. It is very much dealing with suicide and assisted suicide, so if those are things that you are not going to be able to read about or hear about, go ahead and skip to the last book I will be discussing. There's a timestamp. So The Voice in My Head is about a girl named Indigo, and she is one of a pair of identical twins. Violet, her twin, has contracted a terminal illness, and just a few hours after this book begins, she intends to die via medically assisted suicide. Indigo has no idea how she is going to live without her sister, so she is standing at the top of a building when she hears a voice in her head, and the voice says that it is the voice of God. The voice tells Indigo that if she takes her sister to a rock in the middle of Arizona, then her sister will live. And after really trying to convince her family, the entire family winds up going on a road trip together to this place as like a last resort. This book is gonna be real heavy based on just that summary I just gave you, but I'm incredibly interested in this topic. I'm interested in stories of families dealing with grief and dealing with acceptance, in general family relationships. There aren't a lot of books out there in YA, or there aren't as many as you would think, that deal with religion really head on, so I'm also interested in that. I just think that this has some really good concepts, plus Dana L. Davis's book last year got some really good reviews, so I have a feeling that this could be a really excellent book. And finally, I want to talk about Teeth in the Mist by Don Kurtagik, which is being released on June 11th. I know almost nothing about this book, and that is because I am willing to give Don Kurtagik kind of the benefit of the doubt. I really adored her book, The Dead House. I don't read YA horror often, but she has this way of writing YA horror that is utterly terrifying and captivating, and this is supposed to be a genre-bending YA horror fantasy epic, which is a lot, but I also know that it's talking about 3 different generations of women and is inspired by Faustus. Look out, this will probably be on a TBR where I read it in October. Not sure yet, maybe I'll just read it as soon as it comes out, but I am ready to be scared. And that is it. That brings me to the end of my anticipated releases video for today and the end of my anticipated releases videos for the first half of 2019. Like I said in a couple other videos, I will be checking in again in June. I will post some more videos talking about the last half of the year, but that is the end of the videos for now. What are some books that you are really highly anticipating in 2019? Let me know down in comments below. If I haven't talked about one of those books in any of my videos, let's go ahead and add some more books to the TBR. What are you most anticipating that I talked about in this video? Let me know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!